Have you ever found yourself telling someone to do the exact opposite of what you really wanted them to do, and then watched it work like an absolute charm? It feels kind of like a magic trick, right? Well, it's not magic. It's a fascinating psychological paradox. Today, we're going to dive in and uncover the strange science behind reverse psychology.
It all starts with maybe the most famous example in all of literature. You've got Tom Sawyer stuck with this super boring chore of whitewashing a fence. But instead of complaining, he totally flips the script. He frames it as this rare, exclusive privilege. By pretending he doesn't want any help, he gets all his friends literally begging to do the work for him. And that, right there, is the core idea we're talking about.
Okay, so let's get a clear definition on the table. Put simply, reverse psychology is saying one thing to get someone to do the other. It's a persuasion tactic that totally plays on our natural instinct to resist being told what to do. But as we're about to see, this simple little trick has some surprisingly deep psychological roots. To really get what's going on here, we've got to look beyond the popular term and see what the science actually calls this whole phenomenon. This is where we move from a simple trick to a really complex psychological maneuver. And this is where the language gets really interesting. While you and I say reverse psychology, researchers, they have a much more precise term for it: strategic self-anti-conformity. Now, I know that sounds super complicated, but it actually describes what's happening perfectly. It's a strategy where you pretend to disagree with your own true belief just to get someone else to adopt it. Pretty clever, huh? So the big question is, why do our brains fall for this? Why does being told not to do something suddenly make it seem so irresistible? The answer isn't just that we're stubborn, it's a powerful and, it turns out, a very predictable psychological drive. The key concept here was figured out by a social psychologist named Jack Brem way back in 1966. He called it psychological reactance. And at its core, it's that kind of prickly, agitated feeling you get when you think someone is trying to take away your freedom of choice. You know the feeling. So Brem broke this down into a really simple 4-step chain reaction. It starts with step 1, perceived freedom. You believe you can make a choice. Then, step 2, a threat comes along, maybe a sign that says do not touch. All of a sudden, you feel that internal pushback, that little voice saying, hey, don't tell me what to do. That's step 3, reactance arousal. And finally, to feel in control again, what do? You act to restore your freedom. And that often means touching the very thing you were just told to avoid. Once you understand reactance, you start seeing reverse psychology everywhere. Seriously, it's a tool that gets used in all sorts of situations, from casual family dinners to high-stakes business deals. Let's take a look at how this plays out in the real world. In parenting, it's that classic "I bet you can't" challenge that just taps right into a kid's desire to prove themselves. In marketing, you've got Patagonia's absolutely brilliant "Don't buy this jacket" campaign. By telling you not to buy it, they made it seem exclusive and desirable. And guess what? Sales went through the roof. And in negotiations, playing hard to get, that creates a threat that the other side might lose the deal, which motivates them to offer better terms just to secure their freedom to close it. But we have to talk about the risks, because this is definitely a high reward, but also a very high risk strategy. It's a delicate dance, and if you misstep, it doesn't just fail, it can blow up in your face, like spectacularly. So who does this work on best? Well, it's mainly people who are already prone to reactance. Think about strong-willed or stubborn personalities, teenagers who are naturally testing boundaries, or really anyone with a high need for autonomy. Their deep-seated desire to reestablish control is the very engine that makes the whole trick work. And this is a critical warning. This tactic is an absolutely terrible idea to use with people who have low self-esteem or who tend to be more compliant. They might not experience reactance at all. Instead, they could take your negative suggestion literally, internalize it, and end up feeling even worse. It can be genuinely harmful, so just don't do it. Failure here really comes in 2 main forms. The first one's pretty simple. They just do exactly what you said, which is the opposite of your goal. Whoops. But the second one is way more damaging, a failure of trust. If they realize you're trying to manipulate them, you don't just lose the argument, you lose their respect. They might even defy your real wish just out of spite. And this brings us to the really thorny ethical questions. Because at its heart, this technique is based on deception. We have to ask, when you use it, are you being a clever influencer, or are you being a coercive manipulator? The line really comes down to intent and transparency. So a therapist might use a similar technique, something called a paradoxical intervention. but they do it with a client's consent to help them. That's constructive. But using it deceptively for your own personal gain without caring about the other person, well, that's just manipulative coercion, and its outcome is almost always negative.
And that brings us to the single biggest consequence of all this. Every single time this tactic is used, it chips away at the foundation of a relationship. Trust is incredibly hard to build and incredibly easy to break. A relationship built on intentional dishonesty just isn't sustainable.
So what's the alternative? Okay, it's not as flashy, but it's infinitely more effective in the long run: direct, honest communication. It means being open, actually listening, and building a relationship on a foundation of mutual respect. It's definitely harder work, but it's the only way to create real, lasting trust. Ultimately, reverse psychology reveals this deep truth about our powerful desire for autonomy. It's a potent tool, for sure, but it's a risky one that can easily damage the very relationships you're trying to navigate. Which kind of leaves us with a final question to think about. In a world that's always trying to persuade us of something, where do you draw the line?